Hello, everyone. We are here with another YouTube video, and we are College Point Virtual Advising Team, and today we have a special guest who's going to help represent the parent experience in the college application process. The mission of College Advising Corps is to increase the number of low-income, first-gen, and underrepresented high school students who enter and complete higher education. If you have any topics or questions about this video, please leave a question in the chat. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and click the bell to get notified when we post. To get started, we're going to introduce ourselves. So my name is Juliana. I'm a second-year virtual advisor. I went to Guilford College and I majored in political science, and I use she, her pronouns.
Hi, my name is Kaya. I am a first-year virtual advisor, and I graduated from UNC Chapel Hill in 2018 with a double major in global studies and anthropology, and I use she, her pronouns.
Hi, my name is Toby Kinsel, and I'm the project director for College Point. I have more than 25 years experience supporting students and parents and families going to college. So I'm really excited to be here today to talk about how parents can support their children. I'm even more excited that Jeanette Brewster is joining us today. She's a parent of one of my former students. And Jeanette, please introduce yourself.
Yes, so I'm Jeanette Brewster. My daughter, Navon, is a first-generation college graduate, and she graduated from USC in Columbia and now working out in Arkansas.
Okay, so just to let you know, this format of this YouTube Live is not the same as what we usually do. But through this video, we will be talking about some common parent concerns and questions with Toby and Jeanette. And if you have any questions about the topics that we cover, please feel free to leave a comment on this video once we upload it, or also feel free to reach out to your virtual advisor as well. So let's go ahead and get started.
Okay, so we're going to cover a range of topics today, but to get started, we're going to focus on the socio-emotional transition for parents when you go to college. And so the first question we want to ask is, what's your biggest tip for parents who are struggling with their child moving away for college, especially if it's a long distance?
So I would say just really being involved in the process as far as like going to orientation and really getting yourself acclimated with like where your student will be living, what the campus is like, attending all the meetings that they make you attend, especially the one for security if you have some concerns about that, and signing up for the resources to be alerted for like different things that are going on at the campus. So just really being involved is probably like the first thing I would say.
Yeah, and I think that's really great advice. And especially sometimes students might say they don't want you to be involved. And so they might say, oh, you don't need to go to orientation with me, or you don't need to do these things. But they do need your support. And the more information they have, the more you have, the more confident you're going to feel. Going through orientation, they give you so much information, and you really get connected to the different supports that are on campus. So orientation is really important to do that, and it helps ease your fears that you might have. Also, I would just, starting out as we go into this YouTube Live, I would just say, try to remind yourself that this is your student's experience. They are now starting the journey to adulthood. And that's really hard for parents to go through because you're so used to being engaged in their lives. You're used to getting on Power School, or those different types of ways that you can connect and get their grades and all of these things. And now they're journeying into something that they are fully going to be on their own. And just understanding that that's their journey and it's part of the process, and they're becoming adults. And it is going to be what it's going to be. And so give yourself a little bit of peace in knowing that that this is their journey, and it's part of the process to let them go on that journey.
Awesome. So the next question is, if you are a parent that has not experienced college or gone through the process yourself, what are ways to support your students? Are there things you should be on the lookout for to make sure your student is doing okay in their first year?
Well, so this was definitely a new experience for both of us because I did not attend college. So I would say just, kind of reiterating what Toby said, just like the open line of communication with your kids. And just like, just, yeah, open lines of communication, talking to your child, setting up like regular scheduled calls with them, like weekly or, things like that, was really important for us. Luckily we have a really good relationship, so she's not she tells me a lot of stuff. So, but if you're a parent whose child doesn't, then maybe there's like another family member that they might feel comfortable talking to about different things that they might be struggling with, that could be helpful as well.
Yeah, and Jeanette, did you have any fears in the process with your daughter that, never going to college yourself, that you were just unsure about?
I knew just from talking to different people that and with college itself, like academically, I knew that it would be different, because whether your kid like was really good in high school, that college learning was different and they might struggle a little bit there. Just making sure that I talk to her about all things. I don't know what kind of topics y'all talk about, but just talking to her about all kind of topics when it's like parties and, different things like that. So,
Yeah.
but she's, yeah, go ahead.
What were you going to say?
No, I was gonna say she's pretty aware of what's going on around her, but I know sometimes you can get caught up as a student with like hanging out with friends, and some friends are not as aware or as responsible. So just making sure that she knew what to do and where to go and those types of things.
Yeah, that's really great advice. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the YouTube around security and those types of things. I know in my years of working with parents that I've heard from parents that it is hard, if you haven't been to college, to know all the ways that you can support them. And that is one way that you can really rely on your College Point advisor. Because as a family member or a parent, your College Point advisor can help give you those tools and those tips and those ways that you can support your child as they transition to college. And so I really encourage anyone watching this to really rely on their College Point advisor for that. But also, don't try to hold your child back in any kind of way because it wasn't an experience that you have had. I've seen parents over the years that because they're just afraid that they don't know, that they don't have all the answers. As a parent, you're used to being the one that has all the answers for your child. And you want to be the one that keeps them safe and provides all the things. And when they're going into an experience that you haven't had, that often can be frightening as a parent. And then you might feel some insecurities about that. And sometimes children can feel that in feeling like maybe they're not supported, or maybe because you don't know what that experience is going to be like, that can cause some distance. And so I would encourage parents to kind of lean into that and not feel any kind of insecurity about not understanding the process. I mean, I know when my son went to college last year, it was so different from when I was there. So even if you have been to college, it changes so much that even for those parents, it's a new experience doing it 20 years later, 30 years later, because things change so dramatically. So every parent is going through a transition, regardless of whether or not you've been to college or not. And the best thing that you can do is just continue to support your child. And as Jeanette said, keep those lines of communication open and let them know that you are there and supporting them and want the best for them.
Absolutely. I think that's all some really good points. So what are some ways to advocate for your students when you don't have the control that you used to? So they're no longer living in your house. You can't talk to their high school teachers. How do you adjust to that?
So that was a transition because I'm used to wanting to like jump in if she's having issues or was having issues. So it was more so just having her talk to me about what was going on and giving her advice, and then just asking her, does she know the right people to talk to or where to go? And yeah, so I didn't force myself. I know some parents force their kids to give them like access to their logins and stuff. I did not do that, but I just, she knew that she could talk to me when something was happening. And she also had other resources from programs that she was involved in when she was in high school, of people that can give her, like Toby, that could have given her direction on what she should do or who she should talk to. So yeah, just try not to be too overbearing.
That is really great advice. So there's this thing that's called FERPA, and I think it stands for like Federal Educational Rights and Privacy Act. And FERPA precludes, so meaning it prevents parents from having access to any information regarding their child. That's student health center, that's grades. The only thing that you can do is pay for things. Truly. Like you can't even access financial aid. So that's really important for parents to know. Now, students can sign a release and give parents access to that. And I've, like Jeanette, I did the same thing. I did not, well, first of all, I knew my son wasn't going to give me access, but I didn't even push for it because, again, they're adults now. And so this is now their time. And many of us have heard the term helicopter parents. And I think there's a new term now that's going around. I can't remember what it is, but they need to start being advocates for themselves and being responsible for themselves, because they are now going to be adults in the world. So as much as you can give them the tools to do that, the more successful they're going to be. So like Jeanette said, you all are paying, financial aid is paying, scholarships is paying for a ton of resources that are available on college campuses. So when they call and have a challenge, or let's say they get an F on their first test, which can often happen in college, the first step is talk to your professor. Students have academic advisors. They each have an academic advisor, and these are people that they'll meet with at orientation. And so they have a resident assistant on their hall. Many colleges and universities have offices of multicultural affairs. Some are now starting to have offices of first generation support for students. And so there are lots of people on campus that can support them and helping them work through, okay, who do you contact about that? What steps should you take? Asking when they call with a problem, putting it back on them to ask those questions to help them think critically about what they can do. That's the best way that you can advocate for your students. I will also say that there are times when difficult things could happen. And so it's not a bad idea to have the RA's contact information, or to know what those phone numbers are that you can call. There's an Office of Parents programs typically at colleges and universities. So when you go to orientation, they give you all those phone numbers, and it's not a bad idea to keep them, because if things should happen, you do have phone numbers that you can call, offices of student affairs, that you can get support on how to best support your child. But the best advice, as Jeanette said, is like, don't be overbearing, because they'll cut you out. Your students won't talk to you anymore.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's important, like you said, because it's part of the process of them becoming an adult and being independent, because you don't want them to get out there even after college and still be calling you to try to figure out how to do things that they could have learned prior.
Yeah, no, I was really lucky to not have an overbearing parent. And there were struggles that came with that, but I grew from that very quickly. And I was able to grow up very quickly and learn, how to budget, if something goes wrong, like in classes, okay, my mom's not here to then hold my hand and walk me. Like, I had to go to office hours. I had to go and talk to people and advocate for myself and make phone calls and stuff like that. So, I definitely think that, you don't have to like kick your kid out of the nest and hope they fly, but you need to allow them that chance to explore and find themselves and grow, which then segues into kind of what should parents and students talk about before going to college. And I'll give a little bit of a student perspective first. So, me and my mom I mean, we didn't really talk much about college just because I went to boarding school before, so I already knew what it was like to live away from home. But I would say kind of the most important things to just touch base on, make sure you guys are on the same page is, first of all, talk about what you're excited about. Talking with parents and students doesn't have to be like, you know, these are all the concerns we have. Talk about what you're excited about for the next 4 years and the next stage of your student's life. Also, again, talk about those fears, those hesitations, you know, because those need to be addressed. And it's not necessarily bad if you have hesitations or concerns about your student going away, or your student is scared, you know, this is new to them. So definitely being able to be open about that and talk about that is a really good step to, you know, being able to acknowledge those feelings and, you know, make a plan of how you're going to move through those issues. Another thing that is important is finances and money. Because I remember I had a job back home, but I moved away. I no longer had a job. And my mom was like, well, you're an adult now, you know, financially, good luck. So, you know, having those conversations, you know, of how much, you know, parents can help support you in either emergencies, or if you need books, or if you need additional supplies, you know, definitely having that conversation of, you know, you need to get a job, or you need to do this, or I will help you with this, just to have that good baseline. And then also another thing that I think that parents and students should talk about, that's just kind of on the top of my mind, is just campus safety. Because, you know, your student is young and they're an adult, but, you know, just making sure that, you know, they get into a tough situation on their campus, you know, that you're there for them, but also, you know, just make sure that they are aware of, you know, things that could arise, and what they should do in those situations, just to make sure that their safety is a top priority. I know sometimes that's a hard conversation to have, but that was one that my mom was very adamant about. She was like, if you find yourself in this situation, like either call 911 or get you and your friend to the hospital or something like this, just to make sure that, you know, you're not going to be there 24/7 with your student, but, you know, making sure that they have the right resources and the knowledge of know who to talk to and who to call when emergencies arise.
I just want to add something really quickly. So before moving in, my mom and I talked a little bit about communication, but we didn't really establish a plan. It was just, let's talk while you're going through this. And I think we experienced a lot of unnecessary frustration the first semester my freshman year, because I was very overwhelmed by all the new experiences, and she kept calling me, and I didn't always have time to talk to her, but also she wanted to know what was going on, and so she'd leave voicemails, but I was not the best about checking my voicemails, and so then the frustration would kind of build. And when I went home for fall break, we kind of had a check-in, and we decided, okay, we're going to talk every Sunday night. We'll have I'm going to put that in my calendar. We'll set aside at least an hour for that, and I'm going to text you throughout the week, and I need you to respond to me, even if it's just to say, I'm really busy right now working on something, I can't talk, but thanks for checking in. And of course that's going to vary from student and parent to student and parent, how often you want to talk. But I think having some sort of schedule set up before move-in happens can really help establish something that's a constant for the student in a time that's a lot of change. And for you too, I mean, your child's leaving possibly for the first time. It's good to know I will talk with them at least once a week or something like that.
Yeah. And then do you want to segue into also boundaries, making sure that boundaries are set up between parent and student before they go?
Yeah, so I think that kind of relates to what we were just talking about, but I think it's important that you outline to your student what you need from them in this transition, in terms of communication, in terms of financial expectation, if you need for them to get a job, because you're not going to be able to send them money or those types of things, just because otherwise a lot of unknown and assumptions can happen. And I think that leads to possible conflict or just confusion, which isn't always super productive. Also for the student going into it knowing, okay, I need to find a work-study job that's a priority my first semester, or I need to find a job off campus. And knowing that they need to plan for that to be a chunk of time they're using. So when they go to the first like campus activities fair, they don't sign themselves up to be in 20 clubs and then realize they're way in over their head because they've signed up for so many clubs. They need a job. They need to talk to you. It can be very overwhelming. And that's not to say not to get involved in campus, but just to recognize that there are a lot of different things students can do when they first move in, and they just have to value their time and recognize that it's okay to take an afternoon off and like just watch some Netflix, you know?
Yeah.
This is such a great topic, because I remember very vividly a parent that I worked with whose son was going to the college where I worked and was not responding to her calls or texts or anything. And she called me frantic, you know, worried about him, and he was fine. He was just refusing to communicate with her because she, in all honesty, was being too overbearing. And so I'm just curious about Jeanette, like what did you and Navon establish around communication? Because that is such an important thing.
So we didn't have like a set day to call and talk, but I like generally, like if it's been more than a week, I would make sure that we checked in. One of the things, because you know, as parents, it's hard to know what the kid's schedule is, like when is a good time to call. So I did tell her, I said, well, if you give me your schedule, not so I can be checking up on you, but just so I know when is a better time to call you and when is the time not to call you. That worked well for us. So she would always give me like her schedule for whenever a new semester was. So that helped a lot. Also, having the number of one of her roommates was very helpful. There was only one incident where I had to text like one of her friends and was like, hey, when you see my daughter, tell her to call me. And she was like, oh, I've just been so busy. But it was like probably more closer to her senior year, and she was involved in a lot of clubs. She was working, and it was just a lot. And so she did call, but she was fine. But she was like, you text my friend. I was like, that's why I asked for their number.
Yeah, I think it's really important to realize that their schedule is going to be the opposite of what it was in high school. So depending on when they have classes, they might have early 8 or 9 o'clock classes, but they might be taking naps during the day. They might have afternoon classes. They're definitely going to be up late. They're going to be studying. They're going to be in study groups. And so just because they're not communicating to you doesn't necessarily mean they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. It might mean that they're doing exactly what they should be doing. When I went to college, and I grew up in Illinois and went to college in Mississippi, so I was really far away. And the deal my mom made was, I'm going to call you Saturday at 9 a.m., which, as you can imagine, as a college student, was not the best time. And this is before cell phones. This is landline. So she called me every Saturday at 9 a.m. And if I wasn't there, you know, it was going to be a big thing. So, but like Jeanette, when my son went to college, we didn't have an established time, but I did the same thing. If it was more than a week, then I called and checked in. And then I think Juliana had great advice around just having some agreement around texting, because I know as a parent, I would text, hey, just checking in. And then he would write back, all cool. And then I was good. So if you can establish those kinds of things of like, hey, if I text you, text me back, that's helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Communication is, I think, the biggest transition when it comes to parent and student relationships when moving away. And again, I feel like I'm an outlier in this situation because I'm a real big mama's girl. I was probably calling my mom more than she was calling me, so that was never an issue. Because I'd always call and be like, Mom, I just didn't have a good day. And she's like, I'm at the grocery store. Can I call you back later? And I'm like, no, like, you're talking now. But yeah, so the next thing that we kind of want to segue into is, what are things that your parents did that made things more challenging for you when you went to college, and what did they do that was helpful? So again, my answers to this, maybe Juliana can speak a little bit more to this, aren't necessarily the norm. Again, me and my mom are very, very close. She's like my role model, my bestie. And so I guess one of the things, like, I have my mom on Find My Friends, and that is a boundary that we did talk about. I still have her on Find My Friends just because it's easier. And one thing that it was, she didn't overstep her boundary, but she would follow me sometimes, especially on nights or on weekends. She'd be like, it's 2 a.m. Where are you? And, you know, it was never like a jab or something, or like a get home this instant. But, you know, that was something she was always following up on me, and like kind of following my every move. And that was something that I was just kind of like, Mom, like, I know what I'm doing. Like, I'm safe. If I give you the safe word, like, you know, I'm okay. So that was one thing. And then also one thing that I didn't like, but was in the end the best thing for me, whenever I would call my mom and ask for advice, she would say, I don't know, honey, this is up to you. And that is my least favorite answer when I'm like, I'm struggling, I don't know what to do. And we would talk through it, but then she's like, the decision is up to you. And I was like, I'm 18, I cannot make this decision, but it really was my decision. So that was also a frustrating thing. I would call every week with a different dilemma, and she'd be like, this is your decision. Like, you have to think through this yourself, and make that final decision. Again, what did they do that was helpful? My mom was very, you know, allowing me to be my own person, allow me to find myself, allow me to work through those problems. If it was an emergency, she would definitely, like, you know, do this. But if I was just trying to think of like my major, I realized I was unhappy in my major, and she was like, I cannot make this decision for you, honey. Like, this is your life, this is your career. So she was very, you know, she towed the line between, you know, that overbearing parent, but, you know, also allowing me to make my decisions. So it was very helpful, just to have like a little leash to hold on to, but I wasn't, you know, being gripped and told what to do every day. But Juliana, do you have any more?
Yeah, so I actually, my sophomore year, I started working as a resident assistant, which is an upperclassman hired by the college to live on dorm with other students and enforce like college policies. And they're supposed to be a resource for students to kind of direct them to different resources on campus, or to help with roommate disputes and that type of thing. And so I worked with freshmen for my first 2 years. And one of my residents, they lived like 45 minutes away from school. And so they would go home every single weekend, and their mom would come in every single weekend. And I think it really prevented them from starting to feel at home at school and starting to build a community, because they just were never there when it was free time. And they really struggled. They had a lot of roommate issues, just because the mom would insert herself into it. So it would actually be a conversation with both of the roommates, and then the mom would want to Skype in to talk through it. And I think this really relates back to what everyone's been saying, that this is the student's experience, and you want to support them and be there for them and listen to them, but you have to also like empower them to handle what comes their way. And you can't, like, it just is very, very difficult if you're trying to be there for every single thing that they go through, because then they don't learn how to walk on their own. And then personally, my freshman year, my mom and I, like, it's just been the two of us, so we're very close. And so I was really overwhelmed with a lot of the times when she would want to talk and I had a big test, or I had midterms coming up. And so eventually we figured out, like Jeanette mentioned, I shared my schedule with her, and she started to understand that, like, if I did talk to her when I had midterms coming up, it was not going to be a good conversation, because I was going to be really stressed. And what she started doing is she would send me like letters in the mail, or she would send me text photos of my cat, and just being like, I'm so proud of you, you got this, and stuff that felt very encouraging. And like, I knew she was there for me, and it didn't feel so much like an ask for me to do something. And that was just really helpful when I was not sleeping. And then she would also tell me, like, Juliana, you need to sleep tonight. Like, it's okay if you don't get an A in this class. Like, your health is more important. And I think sometimes you need your parent to kind of remind you that, like, what you should be prioritizing. So yeah.
Jeanette, did you have any, like, after going through the experience, some things that you think you would do again, or things you wouldn't do again?
It was and it's different, kind of like Kaya like said, Navon is a different type of child. So with having the next 4 coming up that will be going to college, I probably will have more like concerns. But I also what was I gonna say? There was something that Kaya had said that I was gonna talk to. But we just were open. She did share her location with me, so I was able to see that, but I didn't like overstep there. Oh, that's what I was gonna say. I was the mom who was like, look, you've been parented. I'm just your consultant at this point. You have to figure out what you want to do with your life. And then sometimes I would give her advice that I knew she didn't want to hear. And even if she was like, well, I don't want to hear that now, I was like, that's fine. And you can do with it what you please later, but this is what you need to hear. But she was pretty independent, like from day one. And so like even like her freshman year, that summer, she was like, hey, I'm getting a job this summer and I'm not coming home. And I was not surprised. And I was like, okay. So like she legit did not move back home once she left college. So we had a few visits, but that was it. For us, the boundaries came with her, and I don't know if this is something we're gonna talk about later, but it came with her coming home for visit, like on a holiday, and like me having a life. And in the beginning, it was putting everything on hold to give her all my attention until I realized like, oh, she's coming home to see her friends. She's not really coming home to see me. So then I had to just say, well, when you come home, you just have to get in the groove with everybody else, but we're not going to stop and make a big deal about you being home because this is kind of what life is now. So a few times she started to feel it like, well, you're not here. And I'm like, well, we have a life too. When you're gone, you do what you do, but you have to figure out how to fit back in with the family when you come home. So I don't think she really liked that too much, but she got used to it.
And one thing that did happen when me and my sister were going to school at the same time at UNC, and she quickly learned that whenever we came home on breaks, we, for the first couple of days, just wanted to sleep
Oh yeah.
and eat and watch Netflix and not talk to anybody. And that wasn't us going through a mood, but especially after finals, you're drained. So, especially coming back home, let your student have that time to reset their mind, their body, their health. And, don't be alarmed if they come home and they're just want to sleep all day, unless there is a health issue, you need to address. But, understand that, your students it's a lot, especially to just come home after that. They'll probably have a lot of sleepless nights over finals or, so that was one thing my mom just quickly learned. She was like, okay, I'll talk to you in a couple days.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Slept a lot.
The one piece of advice I would add, because I've heard this from students before and saw it play out in real time, was sometimes when there are challenges going on at home with the family, you have to think critically about whether or not you want to share that with your student in college, because as Juliana and Kaya have indicated, college is really stressful, and especially during midterms and final exams. I mean, they are studying all the time if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing and studying. And if you are calling with financial concerns, or other, of course, if there are like life-threatening situations, like a grandparent dies or something like that, you need to tell your student. But sometimes it can be hard deciding what should be shared and shouldn't be shared. But I would caution parents to think about what their students are going through, and not put all of those family challenges on students when they're in college, especially financial issues and things like that, because that can add just a big additional stressor for students.
I agree. That's a big one, because her biggest concern with leaving was the fact that her younger siblings, she wasn't going to be here for everything. And I was like, your focus is school, is not what's going on here at the house. So that was something that she had to get used to, not being so involved with everything that was happening here at the house.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up too. A couple years ago, I had a student that actually committed suicide before they went to college because of the stress that they felt leaving home. And I think it's really important to understand that sometimes students are carrying a lot of burdens that you're not aware that they're carrying. And
Mhm.
so if they're taking care of their siblings, or if they're working and helping and paying bills, which that a lot of families are doing that to make ends meet. But sometimes students can worry very greatly about what's going to happen when I leave.
Mhm.
And I often would do a workshop with students where they would, I'm sorry, my dog's barking. They would write their fears down on a piece of paper and put it in a hat. And almost every student would write, I'm worried about what's going to happen to my siblings, or I'm worried about what's going to happen to my parents, or particularly some of you who might be listening to this who are undocumented, and concerns about immigration. All of those things weigh very heavily on students. And so, as Jeanette said, as much as you can take the stress off of them and not make comments like, what's going to happen when you leave? Or like, the more that you can assure them, we're good, we're going to be fine, we've got this. Your job is to take care of you in college and focus on yourself. And my job is to take care of us at home, and we're going to be fine. The more that you can do that, the better it will be for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also just a quick tidbit, if as a student, like, if your student is a big part of taking care of siblings or financial dependence, make sure you make a plan and you talk about that before you leave, especially like, if you have a parent that's on disability, make sure you have a plan set in place. Make sure that, if your student is worried, make sure you tell them, like, this is what we're going to do. This is the plan. And just so you can at least ease some of those fears. I don't have the answers of what those plans should be, but, make sure you talk through that extensively and make sure you have plans and ways you're going to, deal with your child going off.
That's really great advice, Kaya, because then that can help the student feel more peace at leaving.
For sure, and that touches on, so the next topic we want to talk about has to deal with like the financial adjustment and different concerns that parents could have. So to get started, we want to talk about, how do you handle conversations about the financial costs of college? Do you have any misunderstandings that looking back on, you're like, oh, well?
So I was really blessed to have a lot of support through the program that she was in before she went. I don't know if I can say it, Toby, but so she was in a program called Bridges to a Brighter Future throughout high school, and they were very instrumental in like the whole process of financial aid. Like, so she knew a lot of the things that I didn't even know. She's like, oh, I already did this. We applied for that. Like, a matter of fact, immediately when we told Toby that she was accepted to USC, she was like, oh, well, there's this program, there's that program. So like, just knowing either like resources from like the high school guidance counselor or other people that you might know that have been through it, that can walk you through like any financial concerns you have. Because I feel like it is possible for all students to go to school. You just have to really think about like where you're going to go. So Nirvana initially wanted to go to Michigan State, and I was like, that's great. And she wanted to go to a school back in our hometown in Philly. I was like, that's great, but for the same education at a state college, you can go for a lot cheaper. So even though she got accepted with a scholarship to an out-of-state university, it was still going to be more money. So just kind of letting the kid know that, you can still have the experience. It might be a different university, but you can still have that same experience of going away to college. That was the big thing for us, was just reeling her in as far as like where she wanted to go, and then showing her, okay, well, this is the cost versus this cost, so she can really see and understand it and make it like, just more open communication. It wasn't just me trying to figure it out for her and her not knowing what that looked like. So she was pretty aware and involved in the full process.
Yeah, and I think that's the best thing that you can do. Conversations about money in general are just hard. And that's what the College Point Advisor is there to do. And so, again, parents listening in, your child has a College Point Advisor, and their role is to help go through financial aid award letters and walk through what all of the different things mean. And it's best if you both can be a part of that conversation. And I think it was maybe Kaya who said earlier, if if there are going to be financial considerations like you can or can't pay or can and can't support, it's better to have those conversations early on and now, and just open and honest about it so everyone is on the same page. My son and I had to take out a really big loan for his freshman year of college. And as it turned out, that ended up being a huge stressor for him. And so in my thinking, I was doing a good thing by helping him and supporting him because I wanted him to be at college. It ended up being a big stressor. And so I think it's really important to talk through all those details so everyone is really clear and on the same page. So you don't have any questions or bumps or things that happen. The other thing I would say about finances too is that your child might work a summer job and go to college with $1,000 or $2,000 that they've saved up for spending money, and they will spend it in like the first month that they're there. So it's really important to talk to them of like, how much money do you have? How much have you spent? And they might not always tell the truth. But it's important to have those kinds of conversations once they get there too, because you want to make sure that they're being wise about what they're spending money on in college.
Yeah. And that was definitely a big thing. Definitely teach your child how to budget and manage money. That is still something today that I'm still, learning and experiencing. And definitely I'm so much better at it than I was freshman year in college. But, my mom was a big advocate for building credit, starting young. So she opened up a credit card for me, and that thing was maxed out for 3 years without her knowing. And it wasn't because I was mismanaging money and just kind of blowing through it, financially, we were not well off. Our financial aid package was not great, due to some reasons. And so I was working like 2 jobs while going to school, and that still wasn't enough. So I was having to rely on credit cards for food and rent and stuff. And I felt so guilty that I couldn't tell my mom because she was the expert at budgeting and managing money and being strict. And I was just over here crumbling. And so, once I finally did tell her, that was like, I was like a puppy with like my tail between my legs. She was at first she was like, why didn't you tell me about this? This is 3 years. But this is new to them, especially extreme. But I mean, if they had a summer job, they didn't really have payments or something like rent or anything, most likely. So, this was new for me. And once I did tell my mom, that was a big relief to have her sit down with me and be like, this is your budget. This is what you earn. This is how you're going to like catch up on everything. But then also another thing to also say, like if with your financial aid, if there's something you don't understand, call your financial aid office at your school. You can call them now, even if you haven't committed to the school and you just want more resources or questions. I promise you, they're super nice, and they will give you the answers that you need, and help you work through anything you don't understand. Again, next question, we kind of talked about this a little bit, but if your child has an important role in your family, like helping with bills, taking care of family members, how do you handle it as a parent? So the parent side of it, when they went to college, did you have conversations with your student about any, financial concerns in that way?
So I actually had a friend who she helped her whole family a lot, and she ended up going to a really wonderful university and got a great financial aid package where she was getting money from the school, and she would often send like half of it home so that her family could have that money to live off of. And I know that was really stressful for her, and like at times she felt very privileged to be at such a great school, but she also felt really torn, like she wasn't able to be at home and helping as much as she could if she had a full-time job. But I know that her family just kept reiterating how important it was to them that she got the education that she was getting. And yeah, I think just having open conversations and recognizing when like it's not necessary for you to tell your student every single thing that's happening, unless they need to be informed about it.
Yeah, I know for us, Navon wasn't really responsible for like any bills or anything at the house, and her siblings were daycare, so she didn't have to do too much other than like if we were at home, she would help out. our biggest thing with Navon and money was that if she had extra money, because she was very giving, she would be buying food and cooking for everybody at her and her when she moved to an apartment after her first year. And then it would be calling me or her godmother for money, and we're like, well, we just gave you money, like, what are you doing? And I'm like, okay, so you can't feed and take care of everybody. Like, I appreciate you trying, but like, it also causes a strain on us because we can't continue to give you extra money to give out to other people. And so that was the conversation for her, was just kind of like I don't have I have 6 kids. Like, I don't have a lot of extra to give. And her grandfather, her dad's father, was gracious enough, and he gave her money every month with the requirement of, I needed to see your transcripts regularly. So like, he would not send unless he saw her grades. So just the budgeting part is really important, because we struggle with that. But yeah, she didn't have many responsibilities at home. She just kind of extended that taking care of people to her friends at college.
Okay, so another question that a lot of parents have is, what kind of job will my student be able to get with their degree? And I think that's very valid, because you're thinking about what's going to happen after they finish and they graduate. And every single school that your student is applying to is going to have a career development center of some sort. And I think that's a wonderful resource that you're paying for, that your student can use as a freshman. They shouldn't wait till they're a senior. They should go in their freshman year and talk about, what can I be doing over the summer? Like, what types of internships could I be doing? Could I get a grant for an internship if I'm not being paid? They want to see you. I promise. I worked in one all 4 years. Like, we're there to support you and to connect you to alum. And it's just there are so many different things you could do with any degree, and you may not know about it, and it could end up being the perfect career for you. So really tapping into what you're paying for or what you're getting out of your school, and recognizing that they want you to succeed, and asking for help.
Yeah, and I will also say I've had a lot of students talk to me about this as well, and parents and parent concerns. There's a large portion of my students are like, their parents want them to become doctors, or they want to go into the medical field themselves. And stuff like that. So they're all like biochemistry, that's it, biomedical sciences. And I will say, your student does not, in order to go to med school or grad school, they do not have to major in biology, chemistry, or biomedical sciences or anything like that. You can major in English, you can major in psychology, you can major in computer science, theater, and you can still, as long as you take the required classes, which is just, usually it's a couple chemistries and bios, you can still go to med school, or in some instances business school, or master's in business or something. And I tell my students that a lot. In order to get that type of career, there aren't as strict regulations as people think. And so, I tell my students, like, if that's not something that you're really passionate about, you're still able to go to med school. And if you want to study English for the next 4 years and that's what you're passionate about, that's great. So just also know that the type of degree that that they major in does not necessarily dictate where they're going to go to further their career. So this is an opportunity for your student to learn more about their interests in the world, and that was my situation. I went in, I was a bio and chemistry double major, was absolutely miserable. And then it wasn't until I went to my academic advisor and talked with my mom that I was like, you know what, I'm not actually interested in learning about that specifically right now. I want to learn more about public health. So, I went about it in a little roundabout way, but if I wanted to, I could still go to medical school. I'm not anymore, because I found my calling and my passion, which is a little bit different. But just also know that there's not one major that's worse off than the other. Your student is going to be worse off if they're a theater major, or if they're an art major, because there's not a lot of job opportunities in that field. So just let them find what they're passionate about. And there's also double majoring, there's also minoring. So just be aware of that.
Also, your student, if they don't know what they want to do, that's okay. A lot of students don't know what they're going to do, and colleges are prepared to support that. And part of when you get to school, you have to take like general education requirements, which can allow you to explore different types of fields or majors. And you have an advisor that you can talk to. And like, there are so many different ways to figure out what you're excited about and what you want to pursue. So like, don't panic if your student doesn't know what they want to do by the end of their freshman year. It's not the end of the world, I promise.
Yeah. Parents, can you speak a little bit to that real quick? Just what your child's major was it what it was intended, or did you kind of let them explore?
You're muted, Toby.
Yeah, because my dog was barking. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so my son ended up, after his freshman year, deciding he didn't want to be in college anymore, and he's now in the Army. So, which was a great thing for him, and he's really happy. I think I've been around K-12 education for a long time, and K-12 has veered in a direction of having high school students graduate college or career ready. And there's a big emphasis. I mean, they're talking, I don't know, Jeanette, about what you've seen with your kids, because I know they're in different grades, but they're talking as early as 6th grade about careers, which I personally think is too early. Because I do think, and Juliana said this, college is about, and this is kind of an old school thinking, but college should be about exploring. And it should be about trying different classes and exploring different things, because even when you're 17 or 18, there are some students that know exactly what they do, and that's the path that they stay on. But I would say the majority of them start out with one thing and realize they want to do something different, and that's what college should be about. Now, you also want to be economical. Like, you don't want your child in college 6 years trying to figure out what they want to do. And that's where the resources on campus come in. As Juliana said, the Career Center, you can go in as a freshman and take a career test to figure out what are different majors you might be interested in having. And colleges will try to narrow you into a major, which I think is also a challenge and a problem. But as much as you can take that time to explore, the better.
Yeah. So Navon, she went into school for hospitality, and she stuck with it the whole time. So she was really clear on what she wanted to do when she was going. When she became a senior in college and was ready to go, when she graduated, she knew she wanted to, do her externship in hospitality. Her professor was actually really instrumental in helping her pick the best internship for her to do. Because there were places she wanted to go, and they were like, look, this place seems great, but it's oversaturated, so you won't get like the real hands-on. So go somewhere else where it's not as saturated, where they only take a few students, so she could really see, like, is this what she wants? And when that was done and it was time for her to figure out, okay, well, where do I want to go with my life after this, or what do I want to do? She was really stuck. She was like, because she's a person that's always like, when she says that's what she wants to do, then I have to see it through. And I had to be the one to kind of reassure her that, hey, it's okay to change your mind if you want to go a different route. And I think letting her know that all the skills that you've learned through the jobs that you worked in school, while you were in college, through this job, they apply to so many different things. Like, you have marketing skills from doing this job, and you have other communication skills and management skills and leadership. So you can apply that to so many different careers, that you don't have to feel like I have to do this because I spent 4 years in college doing this one thing. Like, you can shift, and it's okay. So that was the biggest thing for her. But yeah, I would say the professor was really helpful though, with her figuring out what she wanted to do as far as like the internships that she should apply for and go for.
Okay, awesome. What did we decide on this?
I think that, so because we're kind of coming up into the hour point, and I think we try to keep it at an hour, but I think there are 2 remaining questions that we touched on, but that are really important. And one is around safety and safety concerns. So I'll just jump off, and then Jeanette, especially since you had a daughter, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And I think some of these things apply to men, but it's really important ahead of time to talk about campus safety. Safety is an issue. There are sexual assaults and there are things that happen. And depending on where the campus is and what kind of campus it is and all of those types of things, it is important to talk about how you behave at parties, how you behave at bars, you know, what to look out for, what not to do. You don't want to get so drunk that you can't stand up, or drugs are a huge issue on campus, and having conversations about drug use, all of those kinds of things. And letting your, I think one of the things that we've alluded to, and Jeanette has really talked about this beautifully, is keeping the lines of communication open. Because if something bad does happen, you would rather your student feel like they can tell you and talk to you than not talk to you at all. And so as much as you can not judge or really shame them for any mistakes or things that have happened, so that that line of communication is open so they can talk to you about things that do happen or things that are happening around them, the better. Most campuses do have offices of campus safety, and they do have procedures for keeping students safe. And so things like don't walk on campus by yourself at night, and use transportation systems that they have to take you from building to building. And those types of things are important.
Yeah, I agree. Like those were really important for us. That was part of one of my must attend meetings at orientation, was the campus safety one with the campus police officer. They gave great information, the phone numbers, and like you said, the text alerts. But yeah, talking to her about, you know, not going out by yourself, going out in groups. And even like I know some moms may not want their daughters hanging out with boys, but sometimes it's a good idea for them to have male and female groups that they hang out together in, because it's just a little extra security for my daughter to have like the guy friends that were, you know, really respectful and watched out for them and watched out for her while she was there. And yeah, like I said, communication is really important. Her campus was an open campus. There was an incident her senior year with the young lady that was in the Uber. So not leaving parties alone, like making sure your friends get to where they're going. So not only like looking out for yourself, but also being aware when your friends are leaving a party by themselves that they aren't, or that you know you check in on your friends and keep tabs on them that way. The Find Your Friend app, or that is really good to know where, you know, if you can't find them, to kind of get a general idea of where they are without, you know, overstepping, of course. It's all really important, just knowing who to call and where they'll be. Yeah, but yeah, communication is key when talking about different things. And what Toby said about shaming, like allow them to be open. My thing with Navon always was, you can tell me anything, but you also have to give me a moment to process things as well. But you can tell me anything. So yeah, or if they can't talk to you, having like a really close family member or friend that they can talk to, that knows when to tell them they need to tell the parent, and when that person can kind of like guide them in the right direction, is good to have as well.
And I will say, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to add one little thing. I love that you brought up the app, because there is another app called Location Lockbox that you can put in alerts and put in a code for, like, to get let's say you're out and you can get an alert at 1 a.m. Are you okay? Yes. And if you're not, then it responds back to an emergency contact. But there are different apps out there that I think using technology now for safety is really important.
I agree.
I just wanted to add, I know the topic of, like, you know, there's academics and social life and stuff that is all good and fun about college, but one topic that a lot of parents don't want to talk about are parties and drugs and that side of college, because it is prevalent on almost every college campus. That is the truth. That's just facts. That doesn't mean that your student will engage in those types of activities, but that does not like make it so that they won't interact with people like that. You know, your student could be walking back from the library and there could be, you know, drunk people on drugs all about. That's not to say that anything bad's going to happen, but just be aware that that is happening. That is a part of college culture, unfortunately. And sometimes, you know, bad things do happen. So again, you don't have legal rights over your student anymore to access all their health records or police records or anything. They legally don't have to tell you, which is one thing my mom was very worried about. She was like, if something does happen, I need you to be 100% open and honest with me, to work through that. Because she was like, I don't want to be kept on the sidelines and know that something's happening but not know what. So that was something that's very important, just to have, you know, make sure your student is aware of safety measures, what to do if they're in a situation, and, you know, to also, you know, just let them, you know, if they do find themselves in a situation and, you know, they're fine, but, you know, they don't want to tell you about it, make sure that you tell them, you know, constantly, you know, like, hey, checking in, like, you know, just let me know, like, if you want to talk about anything, you know, make sure that you're like standing there beside them in support through the good and the bad times. And I also want to tell people about also something that's important is the Good Samaritan law. I don't know if that's a law across all states, but especially in North Carolina, that was a really big important thing, that if, you know, one of your friends, let's say they did drink too much and they are now in like a coma, or, you know, they're vomiting or they're passed out, like you are intoxicated, you can call the cops, call EMS, and everybody will be pardoned. Like if you call the cops, you will be pardoned. You will not be taken in or arrested for being intoxicated underage or on drugs. And that just keeps a lot of deaths happen because people are worried about, you know, their safety and like, you know, am I going to get arrested? Am I going to get in trouble? And just tell your student, you know, whatever you're in, if somebody else is in trouble, you know, that's somebody's child, make sure that you're being proactive and getting them the help they need. So definitely look up the laws in your state on Good Samaritan law.
I would also encourage parents to make sure that their students are paying attention during orientation. I know it's a lot of info, but as someone who worked as an RA, you learn a lot about college policies. And if there is, like, we had an amnesty policy at Guilford, which is what Kai was talking about, where if like somebody needs help, you can call it into PSAFE or someone else and you're not going to get in trouble. But making sure that they know what the consequences look like if they do get caught, because that does happen. And it's not always the end of the world, but they need to know what they're deciding to do and what they could be taking on. And I think it's just always better to be educated to know what your school believes in and what the policies look like than to be surprised by it and then to be like really attacked. Do we want to do the last question? Are we ready for it?
Yeah, I think the last, oh, sorry.
Oh, no.
The one that I think the one about preparing for living on their own is probably the biggest one.
Yeah, I would say living on your own and the rest of your life, just in general. I mean, I could just say, in my opinion, college did prepare me for life. I was put into a lot of real situations where I had to make quick adult like decisions. Some of them didn't work out, some of them did. And just like they always say, you have to fail to succeed. And that's a part of life. Failure is a part of life. And that was a big learning lesson. You know, I've had many sob sessions, many like episodes where I'm like, this is it, curl up in my bed, like I don't want to get up today, like and you know, now I'm you know, I got my own place, I got a dog, I feel like I'm adulting now, and I owe that all to, you know, my learning experiences through college. And I was very shy before college. I was timid, I did not know how to make a decision, and now, you know, through college, that's like, I'm my own person. I'm very independent now. So yeah, it did prepare me for life. But that's all I have to say about that.
I agree with a lot.
Jeanette, what did you do to help prepare Navon for living on her own?
So when she was younger, it was just me and her. So I was a single mom for 15 years before I had her siblings. So she kind of seen a lot of it. We were very open about, like, you know, finances and like, you know, we can't just buy stuff because we want it. And then also she thought she knew everything. And she thought that when she went to college, oh, I'm gonna be fine, this is gonna be great. and incident after incident after incident of just minor stuff. Oh, my phone was stolen and they had the little credit card thing attached to the back. So I have your card and your phone. Like what to do, how to cancel your cards, things like that. So just minor things, someone hit my car in the parking garage. What do I do? So like all those little things help prepare her later on. And even to the point where she called me at 2:00 in the morning and said, I have a cold and I don't have any medicine. I'm just so used to going in the bathroom and getting some cold medicine because you always have everything. So it helped her really think about, the little things that she needs to be prepared for, and even down to choosing who she wanted to live with and roommates, and, can she live with other people? Does she need to live by herself? So it was a lot of growing up. She thought she knew a lot more than what she did. And she admits that, she learned a lot through the process. So,
Juliana, I interrupted you. What were you going to say?
No, I was gonna talk about how I think college sometimes, I joke about it being like training wheels for being an adult, because you have so much, like you have a community that's built and made for you to connect with. You have food that's prepared for you a lot of the times, but at the same time, you're experiencing so much more freedom and realizing like, oh, I decide if I go to class, like that's up to me. I decide if I do my homework. I have to motivate myself. And I think it can be a really great stepping like stool to life afterwards, and recognizing how to build a community and how to exist in the world as an adult.
Yeah.
One of my mom's favorite things that she used to say, and I'll just say this little blurb, was she was like, whenever an issue did come up and she'd do that, that whole parent thing, she'd be like, but I can't say anything because I was young once. Granted, the times were different, but she's like, I got into shenanigans. I messed up. I failed. So honestly, am I disappointed? Yes. But let me tell you, like, to ease the situation, she would always tell me a funny story about how she messed up when she was a child. So just also understanding, like, you were their age once, times were different. Yes. But, still similarly, you were learning, you were growing. You might've made mistakes and failures, but, and that's now as a parent, you got to let, in some ways, let your student also go through those failures and successes, to let them grow as a person.
And I think I was going to say something, I don't want to take up too much time, but a lot of parents feel like if I don't talk about it, then they won't do it. And I think it's more important for me to tell her, hey, I know you shouldn't be drinking, but you probably will. So, watch your drink. Don't let people give you drinks. Like, it's better to have the conversation in the case that something might happen versus just not, talking about it. So I think that's really important.
Yeah. I don't have anything to add except make sure your child knows how to do laundry.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
That you should wash your
grocery shop for yourself. I cried the first time I entered into a grocery store by myself.
Where everything was.
I didn't know what to buy. I didn't know how to cook. I think those were all the questions that we wanted to touch on today. Are there any last words of wisdom or advice that either you or Jeanette have, or Toby and Jeanette, either of you?
My only advice for parents is, not only, but one big thing, communication is the biggest part of it, but also, your kid going to college is also a time for you to find yourself and figure out, who you are outside of just being a parent. So I think it's really important to not get so wrapped up in what your kids are doing, and find out, who do I want to be and what do I want to do for myself as well. I think that's really important. And it helps take the stress off of the kid, because now they know you're not at home crying about them not being there.
That's the best advice. And I think I would just end on the same thing I started with, was it really helped me to keep in mind that it was my son's journey. Mm-hmm. And that he was going to have lessons, and he was going to have challenges, and he was going to have good things. And all of those are meant to help him grow and be an adult. And that really helped me on the times that I felt worried or nervous or not sure about how things were going. And I think if you can keep that in perspective, it gives you a little bit of freedom. And as Jeanette said, then able to kind of re-explore yourself. And if you have a partner or a husband or, whatever in your life, re-explore that relationship and other children and things like that. So not only are they growing, but it's an opportunity for you as a parent too.
Great.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for accommodating this quarantine and still being able to be here and answer questions. Juliana, do you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, so if anyone watching this has any questions, you can leave them in the chat. If you're a parent and your student has a College Point advisor, definitely set up a time to meet with the three of you just to talk through your decision and make sure everyone feels really comfortable. We are super happy that you watched this, and make sure you subscribe to the video.
Bye, thank you.